Hi, and welcome to Tea Leaves Programming. Today we are counting like it's 1479. I know you see the Atari 800 screen on your screen and you think, clearly this is programming. Well, I was always jealous of my friends with the Atari 800 back in the day. There was a lot of teenage posturing between people who owned different computers, the Commodore 64 or the Apple II or the Atari. And generally the vibe was that people thought that those of us with Apple IIs were snooty people with too much money who didn't know good graphics when we saw it or good sound. And we would kind of give the vibe that people with Ataris or Commodores were little babies playing games instead of doing real computer stuff and opening the top up and adding on hardware cards and stuff. But actually, we were jealous. If you had an Apple II, you had all these great games. And there would be a version of whatever game you were playing for the Atari. And it was always, almost 100% of the time, much, much better. So I don't know a lot about the Atari. I never had one back in the day. I got one around the 2000s and spent a little time, trying things out, trying to figure it out. But if you don't learn it at the time, you don't have that kind of organic connection to it. And I actually gave most of my Atari equipment away just last year. It was taking up too much space in the basement and I wasn't using it enough. But I am still curious about it, so I'm going to use this episode of Programming Like It's 1979 to explore the Atari a little bit. Now, the easy thing to do would be to do a game, but I'm not going to do that. I found out that there was some interesting accounting software for the Atari series, and I wanted to look into it. And it turns out that this accounting software is mythical. There's actually two packages here. We're going to be talking about the second one, which is called the Bookkeeper. But the first one was called the Atari Accountant. Now, there are some great histories of this online. I'm not going to recount them. I encourage you to seek them out yourself. But this was developed along with, I believe it was Arthur Young, which was a major U.S. accounting firm. And it is something else. It cost $1,500 back in 1981, which is, in today's dollars, that's a lot more. This is serious software. And it came on 13 floppies. And in order to use it, you had to have one of these bad boys. This is the 1815 dual disk drive. So not many of these were sold. It went out of print almost immediately. For many years, people thought that it didn't really exist, that it was kind of like the Intellivision keyboard where a couple were made as prototypes and no one really had them. But someone went dumpster diving in the back of Atari's Sunnyvale office and managed to find a copy or two of it. And those have now been imaged, and you can actually run the Atari Accountant yourself. However, 13 disks, very complex software, really meant for big businesses. It had a general ledger, it had accounts receivable, it had an inventory system. There are plenty of double entry accounting software sold today that don't do inventory. So it was pretty significant. Very soon after the accountant launched, as I said, they kind of deep-sixed it in favor of a different piece of software called the Bookkeeper. This is much more modest. This is a true double-entry system. So those of you using Quicken, I'm sorry, but computers were doing better than you in 1982. It has a general ledger, it has an accounts receivable system, and it kind of does AP, accounts payable, but it does it by basically reading from the general journal and reconstructing what's in there. There's a few user guides available online. Hold on, let me get back here to my notes. This is the memo pad, right? This is something that I remember from 1982. So if you turned on an Atari So if you turned on an Apple II and you had no disk in the drive and you'd have to hit reset, you would get a basic prompt. This was not true on the Atari. What you got was this memo pad that let you type and did almost nothing else. I found this very weird. There was a basic cartridge. So if the Atari 400 and 800 had a cartridge slot, you can get an optional disk drive, you can get an optional tape drive. So if you wanted to program in BASIC, you would get a cartridge and you would put it in. And then if you turned on the Atari, you would get your basic prompt. The other thing that I found strange, and I cannot explain it because, as I said, I'm not an Atari expert, was the Atari 400 had one cartridge slot and the 800 had two, left and right. And most of the games and stuff went in the left cartridge slot. I haven't done the deep dive yet to really know what was the right cartridge slot used for. So if you know, please tell me. All right, so I'm going to bring up my disk management panel here. And I've got a disk here. I have put it in, and I'm going to reboot. And what's going to happen here is the Bookkeeper is not going to run because I don't have the basic cartridge in. Yes, you heard that right. I'm going to do a warm reset. And let's do a cold reset, I think. There we go. So this is the Atari disk operating system. So Apple II, your disk operating system, at least the old one before ProDOS, was you accessed it through the basic prompt. So if you wanted to see what was on the disk, you'd say catalog. In this case, we get a menu. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this. And I remember when visiting my friend's house, you'd put in a disk, you'd get stuck here. And if you didn't really understand what you were doing, which I definitely did and do not, this was as far as you got. I couldn't figure out how to get to basic from this. So the reason that nothing is running here is because we don't have the basic cartridge in. So all we can do really is look at these programs. And I don't actually even know, is there a way to edit these short of having an editor? I don't know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a cartridge. And that cartridge is going to be a basic cartridge. Now there's a few different revisions of basic. I'm going to just stick in revision A, and this time the Bookkeeper actually runs. So here we are. What are we going to do? Well, let's go straight to startup, right? It's the first time we've run this program. I don't have any data disks, and I'm going to try to not spend an hour on this. I just wanted to scratch the surface just to have fun doing something on an Atari that was not playing a game. So that's weird. I noticed this before when I was preparing for this episode. Whenever I type something, it is adding a line feed. I don't know if that's a vagary of the emulator that I'm using or if somehow that's how it worked back in the day. Well, let's take a look. So company code, that is going to be our name. 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we're actually limited to 6 characters here. If I type my S, it doesn't type. Okay, let's go back, hit escape. That's really annoying. I would love to know if you're out there, did that line feed behavior happen when you did it back in the day on real hardware? I suspect it did, and the reason I suspect it did is that this feels like a basic program, and I bet it's literally running a loop on input. That's what I think is probably happening. As of date. Okay, well, what date? Let's say as of January 1982. January 1st. And then 2 years for the date, right? What happens if I hit enter? Now, I was hoping that it would refresh the screen for me. Rename data disk ID line. I don't know what that is. All right. Data entry, maintenance. Let's go straight to maintenance. I want to see what we can do here. Add, change, and delete GL accounts. Add change control information. Invoice prompts. Let's just see if we could look at what is our chart of accounts here. Remove data entry disk, install database disk. Oh, here we go. Okay, where is my disks? Okay, I'm going to eject. I guess this emulator is a wonderful little control panel for these things. All right, I need the database disk, which is this one. Press return when ready. Incorrect company code. Oh, that's terrible. Okay. Eject. Oh, I wonder, I think I changed the company code from XXXXXX to a new one. And so I wonder if we need to somehow create a new disk. Let's see. Now, what happens if we do reporting? Install reporting disk. I bet we're going to get the exact same thing here. Reporting disk. Okay, well that's good. So there's no journals, right? I don't think. We haven't done anything here, but let's see what happens if we try to list an empty journal. Install database disk. So a lot of disk swapping here. And so I showed you that picture earlier of our double disk. As near as I can tell, and again, anything I say here could be wrong. I'm an Atari amateur. If you have multiple disks, this program, the Bookkeeper, does not seem to use them. I tried putting 2 different disks and had no luck. More disk swapping. Okay, let's go back to data entry here. Was there something under startup to create? Rename data disk. Let's try it. So I do think it's funny that this is a critical operation and the prompt here is not as clear. Remember, 1982, someone's bought their Atari. They may not be an expert in how to use it. Doesn't tell you to eject the disk you have currently in, unlike those other prompts earlier. Database diskette is now in. We have to enter this by hand. That's kind of terrible. Rename another disk, press return, or press escape. We're going to press escape. Okay, so now we have the wrong disk in here, so I'm curious what's going to happen. Let's do some data entry to indicate that we have some equity, right? Okay, so now it knows that I have the wrong disk in. It's nice that it didn't crash. And we're gonna do this disk. So let's think about what just happened here. This is apparently, I'm guessing in BASIC, since we needed the BASIC cartridge for this to work. What just happened here, I think, is we had to eject the database disk, put in the data entry disk. My general journal program was loaded from the data entry disk. Now we have to eject that disk and put the database disk back in, right? So we loaded a program, but then we need the database. It's on a different floppy. These floppies held not that much data. I don't actually recall the exact amount that an Atari floppy held. Apple II, it was like, what, about 130 kilobytes of information? Not a lot. All right, let's see if this works now. No control information. All right. Let's go back. Thrill as I swap disks. So something that I want to say about this. This is actually a very authentic experience. Certainly if you had a home computer in the early 1980s. Having one disk drive at all, right? You start in the late 1970s. Disk drives existed, and very few people had them. Most of us were using tape drives, cassette tapes, to store and write data. Hugely slow, very inconvenient. And then as the 1980s moved on, disk drives became more common. They started to drop in price. They were still very expensive. So you would get one disk drive. You would not get two. If you were really fancy, maybe eventually you'd get a second disk drive. I saved my allowance for months and did in fact eventually get a second disk drive. Why? Because I wanted to pirate games more easily, and that's part of why people did it. All right, so it said something about control information. Let's see. Let's go back to startup, I think. No, I don't see anything there. I saw something about control information. Add change control information. Okay. Of course, if I really wanted to, and I probably should, I could read the manual. Let's take a look at the manual. All right. I think I see what we have been doing wrong. We've got to follow the instructions here. So we need to go to the maintenance menu. And before we can do anything, we need to add some GL accounts. So as I said, they provided a sample disk for this, a sample company. And there's this really dire warning in the manual saying, for the love of God, don't just copy the sample disk and try and change it to your company or your accounts. It'll go really poorly. So I'm going to actually follow the manual here. So I need to enter some accounts. All right, so cash on deposit. Okay, at least it does that. This has to be specific to the emulator. There must be something wrong. I cannot believe that even Atari would ship a program that did this when you entered things. If you're an Atari expert and you can explain this behavior to me, please leave a message in the comments below. So I should mention we do have now memberships here at Tea Leaves Programming. There are basically a few tiers of membership. You're welcome to join them if you want. The lowest tier is just, $1 a month, basically saying thanks for making these videos. The higher level tier gives you access to these videos before they go live, typically about a week. And that's largely because I try and stay about a week ahead, so that I do one video a week, not always, but usually. And so if you really want early access to these videos, you can have it. I'm trying very hard not to go in to this kind of Patreon world where I create a community, in part because part of my joy in this channel is doing weird stuff like an Atari accounting program that no one except me actually cares about. And I feel like if I went too far down the line of, well, what do you want to hear? That it would kind of change the nature of the channel. And I don't want that. I'm okay being a small fish in a big pond and making this fun for me rather than a job. Okay, so now we need the control information. Oh, and here we have that problem where it's all scrolling. I'm going to totally follow the manual here to know what to enter. Okay, I had to hit the backspace. Folks, this is pretty grim. Okay, we need a few vendors. This time I'm going to really try to only have one vendor. Initializing account balance. Here, let me show you what I'm looking at here. Before you begin entering initial account balances, you must enter GL accounts. All right, let's try this. We're going to go back. We need the data entry disk. Once again, swapping disks. This is good stuff. This is great YouTube. All right, enter 2 from the main menu. I know we're getting there. 24, general journal. I hope I get to swap a disk again. Yes! Okay, well, we said we're doing from January 1st, right? 01, 01, 82. Okay, so we're going to say we have 100 and, well, sure, why not? 142,644,000. And I did not create account 9999, so let's see if that's part of the system or not. It is. How nice. 42644 minus. So you put a minus after. That's interesting. That's a interesting way to do it. And then I'm going to hit return a couple times. Opening balance. Okay. Yes. Writing it to disk. Okay, I think we've done it. And then they want us to enter other balances. I don't think we're going to do that. Let's see if we can now do a report now that we have created a balance or transferred some money. Except, all right, so we're going to go back here, swap disks once again. Reporting. This time we got through. Okay. So what I want to do, print list, data entry, recording, and period processing. Let's try and just list this journal. List general journal. Okay, database disk. There we go. There's our cash entry. Actually, interestingly, that looked to me wrong. That I thought we were entering 142,644, but we were not. We were entering $1,426.44. So, what do we know about this program? What we know is this is going to hurt. This is definitely where I'm stopping because my brain can't take it. This program is written not just in BASIC, folks. This is written in integer BASIC. So there are no floating point numbers in this program, the way it's working. And my initial reaction was one of horror, but now that I'm thinking about it, this is actually smart. This is an 8-bit computer. So floating point numbers, even on today's computers, are famously squidgy. They're famously low resolution. They're actually not high enough resolution to properly do accounting. Accounting is done in decimal numbers, and if you naively use floating point, what will happen is, like Richard Pryor in Superman 3, you will lose fractions of pennies from your math. So the way that this program has decided to deal with things is you simply never enter a decimal. The last 2 digits in any number you enter are pennies. And then when it goes to display them, it just displays the period there. That's actually probably a really good way to deal with this in 1982 rather than introducing error. So what have we learned? We've learned that disk management on the Atari 8-bit was just as painful as it was on the Apple II. We've learned that there is a real appetite to make these computers useful for things besides games, and that it didn't always work out all that well. It wasn't always as smooth as you would like. If you go back and you use what was considered the best business program of the early 1980s with VisiCalc, a lot more thought went into ease of use than went into this one. Now, partially that's because we're talking about accountants, and accountants certainly in 1981 were used to, this is a terrible process involving real physical books, and you have to do this and this and this and this, and don't freewheel it. So an actual accountant, an actual bookkeeper probably would have found this a lot more tolerable than I do in 2024. Well, I kind of regret not starting my foray into using an Atari with a game. Might be a little more fun to do that. But I did find this very interesting to play with, and I hope you did too. If you are an Atari expert, this is my question for you. This is my challenge. Please say something in the comments. What should I be doing with this Atari emulator? Besides playing games and besides this program, was there anything really unique that I could do with the Atari that I definitely would not have been able to do with an Apple II? Music programs come to mind. The Atari had a much better built-in sound chip than the Apple II. People bought mocking boards and third-party add-ons for the Apple II, but out of the box, Atari sound blew away Apple II sound. So maybe some sort of composition program. I know Electronic Arts had the music construction set. That's what I'm thinking. But if you have a different suggestion, I'd love to hear it. I really appreciate you joining me today. This has been Programming Like It's 1979, or this certainly didn't feel like counting like it was 1479. This was a bit awkward. But this has been Tea Leaves Programming. Thanks for watching.